Yes, live now in the Facebook group. Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Weldon. Quick update on Money Mastery. We're evolving. You're still going to be getting the same solid bookkeeping and accounting guidance you've come to know and come to expect, but we're widening the lens starting this month, widening the lens to the real world side of money, how it feels, how it moves through your business, and how you own your story with money shows up on the job. And so I've had the privilege of watching this community grow, and I'm really excited today to introduce our new regular host moving forward. Morgan Knox has worked in the trenches with skilled trade companies across the country. She currently serves as the Senior Director of Accounting Solutions here at Housecall Pro. And she comes with us from a background in financial management, business coaching, and consulting with hundreds of pro businesses. She's scaled teams, she's cleaned up messy financials, and most importantly, she really gets the human side of this work because money isn't just business, it's personal. So today's theme is exactly that. We're going to be talking about it's personal. So please help me welcome Morgan Knox.
Thank you so much. What a great intro. And I have to echo that sentiment. It's been so great and cool to see Money Mastery as a series. We've had so many great contributors and hosts over the last couple of years. And I love this as a jumping off point and an opportunity to go deeper and broader into all of the ways that money touches our lives, money touches our business. There's so much psychology, right? And how we relate with money and the decisions that it or the influence it has on the decisions that we make as business owners. So super happy for this new kind of perspective that we're going to be bringing to Money Mastery. So you guys, I hope that you will keep everyone who's listening. I hope you guys will keep a really great open line of feedback and commentary with us about what you like, what kinds of topics seem like they might be of interest, because we've really opened the playing field on the number of super interesting things that we can dive into. I'm also exceedingly excited to get to welcome one of my favorite people, Kedma Ough, as hopefully one of our great recurring guests and subject matter experts. So Kedma probably needs no introduction, but to give her a good warm introduction, for those of you guys that don't know, Kedma, in addition to being a great friend and mentor to me personally, Kedma is a nationally recognized small business strategist. She is a best-selling author. If you want to go check out her book, it is called Target Funding. You can go find it on Amazon, and it's a stellar read. Kedma is also the head coach and trainer for HCP and HCP Business Coaching. So those of you who have been in our business coaching community, you've definitely seen Kedma. You've benefited from a lot of the great programming and resources that she's spent years developing for pros at this point. Kedma's also a pro. Kedma, you own a licensed cleaning company now. And because you are very multi-talented, and there might be a little bit of shiny object syndrome happening, or at least a little bit of serial entrepreneurialism. Kedma, you're
Yeah.
also the COO of Ninja VA, so a company that helps place virtual assistants within the home service industry specifically. So to wrap all of that in, Kedma comes to us. She spent over 25 years consulting more than 10,000 pros. And I was really happy to get to welcome you on because I know how obsessed you are with helping founders rewrite their money stories while scaling their companies and just
Yes.
gaining a lot of clarity and confidence. So any initial comments after that welcome?
No, it's just, first of all, I'm so honored. And I just want to, for people who are just listening for the first time, if you have to pick the podcast or the show to listen to, this is the one that can change the dial because we're going to go deep into not only money, but like where it all comes from. And I'm just so privileged to be part of the story. And just thank you. And I'm excited for the journey and couldn't have chosen a better host. So, Morgan, we're going to have a lot of fun.
So thanks for coming to spend some time with me today. And thanks for all of you guys that are joining live and those of you who are tuning in to the recording. So like Chris said in our initial introduction, today's topic is it's personal. I
Mhm.
think that this is one of the rather undervalued, not covered as often topics when we talk about money and cash flow and finances for businesses. But Kedma, I think this has always been a really key part of how you talk and train and coach around money. And it's something that I find really, really resonant. So today, you guys, we really wanted to dive deep into the idea of, people like to say it's just business, right? But I think if we're being honest, we know that it's anything but. So I think let's start off there. And Kedma, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about, you know, when people say it's just business, is it a myth? Is there something to it? What are the emotions and
Well,
realities?
I love when people say it's just business because it lets me get most of the market share. You see, what I've come to realize is that if you study business principles and you look at even a SWOT analysis, which we all know, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we often rely as the idea of threat is something like government relations or restrictions, or maybe it's something around pricing or tariffs. But let's just be real here. Honestly, in most cases, the biggest threat is that your competitor has a relationship with someone and you don't, and you don't. And if you think about the choices we make centered around money, centered around opportunity, centered around our career path, and you really study how it all came about, almost 90% of the time, it was resulting from a relationship. So to me, business is personal. And once we acknowledge it, we open the door to a lot more opportunities for things to happen and come our way.
Yeah, I love that framing and that way of thinking about, all of business is really personal. It's very relationship oriented. And I think there's some great meaty topics we'll have to dive into more in the future around just building on the social capital and your relationships with people. But then specifically just the way that we relate to money as
Mhm.
individuals, right? And about how that colors how businesses lean into it. I think a lot of the time when people say it's just business, it's a little bit of a shield. What do you think about that? Like, why are people hiding behind that as a shield?
That's a really good question, and I think it depends on each person. But I would say, just because I've worked with thousands and thousands of companies across multiple cultures, so let me first be very mindful. English is my second language, which most people don't know unless I call it out. So I have lived in multiple countries, and the first thing we have to understand is sometimes we're guarded, and we keep things like business is personal because of what we were taught, right? And the second thing is that when we say business is personal, we don't have to let our feelings into the conversation. But it's in the feelings that we actually uncover and unravel what's going on so we can move the needle. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll kick it back to you, Morgan, is I tell this to people all the time. If it's working for you, let it work for you. If you have a meaningful, exceptional life, like I feel I do, and I tell my husband, hey, if you think I'm insane, but I'm still enjoying my life, leave me alone. I'm enjoying it. So, same with everyone else. If you're feeling like you're living the ideal life and you don't have to improve on it, and business doesn't have to be personal for you to have your ideal life, more power to you. But
Yeah,
I've learned,
absolutely.
oh, yeah, over and over, that's not the case. So, what's your thoughts, Morgan?
I think that you really drove right to the heart of that, which is that when people are saying it's just business, I think that there's this desire that we want to come across as being very clinical and very, I think there's
Yes.
this idea that being professional is not emotional. But the reality is that we know that financials are the hard part of business, right? Like all of business really centers on money, which is why there's so much that this topic covers. But a lot of the trials and challenges that people face is because of how they think about and the decisions that they make around money and how that influences hiring decisions and which customers they want to work with and what kind of service models they engage with. And all of that really does come back to the point that you made, which is what did we learn? What
Correct.
was trained into us? What were our early money experiences? So honestly, one of the questions I was really excited to discuss with you, and that I think can be really helpful for everyone starting to peel back the onion and just get a little more self-reflective about why am I doing what I'm doing, um, would be like, the question I would ask would be, what's your earliest money memory? if
Mm.
I if I phrase it that way, if you think back and you try to think about, like, everyone has this relationship with money sometime when you became aware of it as a thing, you started to identify some type of experience with it.
Sure.
And I know that's deep. Where does your mind go when I ask you what your earliest money memory is?
I think it's even before money. So I don't often share, I do a lot of speaking, but this is something, if you go back to any of my history of talking, I have never shared this. I've never shared this.
We're getting an exclusive, guys.
We're getting an exclusive. But it's going to show you the power of how impressions happen at a very young age, typically from, up to 7, 8, maybe 9, but like that's where it is. So my earliest idea of exchange, which is what money is, right? I'm exchanging one thing for another, was actually sitting in, we were in our dining room and sitting for dinner. And on my plate, I had X number of peas, because, eating your vegetable. And I had X number of French fries, and I had X number of chicken nuggets. So you can imagine this, right? This is very, except for the peas, right? The kids are going to have their chicken nuggets and the French fries. But this was my first recollection. And it's actually very emotional. And it may not resonate, but I'll tell you why I was so emotional. Because I didn't eat my food. I went to eat my sister's food because I knew I had to save my food. And I didn't psychologically understand it until I was much older. So probably my first recollection of that was probably as early as 4 or 5. But that really spoke to, I came from an extremely abusive home, and I had to learn what is the idea to save. And that's not only saving money, but what was my idea to preserve myself? What was the idea to preserve my mental health, right? And so that has impressed me my whole life. Like I am a saver, even though I'm on the other side and I'm, considered very, very comfortable. I still operate in that perspective. So that was my earliest moment where it wasn't even money. It was even precursor to what I thought money was. It was that I knew at that moment as a young child, I had to protect my own food. So I know that's deep, but that was my first memory that still takes me to today and will unravel more, but it still affects how I make decisions and how I save and whether I decide to spend on something. All coming down to, can I keep my enough chicken nuggets and French fries for myself?
I'm so appreciative that you shared that with us and that this question prompted that reflection. And just, I mean, I think honestly that whenever, I hope everyone who's listening to this who starts to think back and reflect on their earliest money memories, I think it's a really vulnerable moment, right?
Mhm.
It's like, it's something in the crux of your childhood. It's something about how you experienced your upbringing, your relationship, how your parents,
Yeah.
were bringing you up. And I think that that is at the heart of so much of our psychology and later relationships with money. So you mentioned something that I think a lot of people will probably relate to. And even if they haven't directly experienced it to the same extent, I think a lot of us have seen it when we think about the idea of scarcity and
That's
that
right.
being your earliest money memory,
Correct.
and how that influences later behavior. So I think, within our own family, I think about, my husband was raised by his grandparents who grew up in the Depression era. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of us have, family that went through that, and thinking about seeing what their entire lives were like, some of the habits that were so common for um, people who grew up in such scarcity, like the hoarding of food in the
That's right.
house, and the kind of this obsession with like couponing and wanting to like the excitement of like chasing a deal. So when you think back on that money
Yeah.
memory, Kedma, and you have such an interesting journey that will continue to unpack today. How do you think about how that continues to, or how maybe even just influenced you early on and has continued to evolve?
Well, let me just bring up two situations. The first is, when I'm happily married 22 years, but when I first got married, I was so excited that I ran and I got this couch for our home, for our first home. We're in Portland, Oregon. And so, you have an image of like how special that couch is, right? Something I wanted to represent, show my husband. I want a place for us to like really celebrate, right? So everyone should have an image. But this is what he saw as he walks in. He's like, Kedma, you got this $25 couch from Goodwill? Did someone die in it? I still see a line here. I think someone died. We cannot have this couch. And I'm like, but honey, I it was such a good deal. And you see, I was bringing him this gift because in my mind, in order to overcome scarcity, I'm constantly looking for deals. That is how I look at the universe. Even if I can afford full value, I won't enjoy paying full value. Never. I don't enjoy it. I will never buy a brand new car. I will never buy the most expensive home in the, I will never, it's very, very rare. And let's fast forward to today. I travel the world. So, and when I say that, I don't say it lightly. I spent 2 months in Thailand, early January, February. I spent a month in Florence, Italy, about a month and a half ago, and next week I'll be in Spain. Why do I say this very quickly? Is because I was wrestling whether I should pay for business class. Now, I had the money. I had the money. I couldn't justify it. So I thought, who should I talk to that could understand it? So I called my 13-year-old son, Marin, who's on the spectrum. And I go, Marin, that's why I talked to him, because he's on the spectrum. So he could be, I go, Marin, mommy has an issue. He goes, okay, can you help mommy? I go, yeah. What's the issue? He goes, well, mommy has to go to France and she can choose to go economy, where she's going to be 10 hours, really not comfortable and the food's not good. Or she could go business class where she can lay down and she can eat, but it's a lot more money. So he says, well, Mom, I know you. Will you work on the airplane? I said, yes. Okay, if you will work on the airplane, you must go business class because because it is considered work then. And you must be restful for work. And so if you were not working, then I would say you go economy. And that's how I made my decision. But
That's
I
brilliant.
couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I had to have him give me counsel.
To justify, really insightful on his part. And actually, you led so perfectly into what I was going to ask you next, which is this, when you mentioned that relationship that you have, I think one of the most common things that I see is people having guilt even if they
Yes.
pay full price. So like if you don't find a deal, and so you mentioned you have this love of travel and you have traveled all over the
Yeah.
globe, but you're also very quick to share about how one of the ways you make that happen and enable it is you kind of do disaster tourism, which
Yes,
sounds crazy,
I
but
do.
quickly explain, what is disaster
So
tourism? It sounds
disaster,
terrible.
it sounds terrible, but it's amazing because I study the airlines. And one of the things you'll know, and this is terrible, so forgive me, but one of the things you'll study is whenever there is a disaster happening or disaster that has happened, the airlines will immediately drop their deals. And so if you look at many of the places I've traveled across the world, it was literally after a disaster, like after the tsunami. Hey, I'm in Thailand. After the bird flu, hey, I'm heading to Asia. After, like, that is what I've done because really a lot of my flights outside that example I just showed you about business class, most of my flights I would do round trip and probably going to cost me about $400
Mhm.
to go somewhere there. So, and the way I look at it honestly is I'm helping the economy there. I'm
Yeah.
there to support. They're going through struggle. The hotels are not able to have people in. So, you don't, when we talk about what does it look like to have your ideal life, it doesn't have to be expensive. There's a lot of people who boast online, oh, I'm with Delta and I'm in the Delta, what is it, the lounge. You know what I boast on? I'm on Spirit Airlines. It gets me there anyway. So I think this is the part where we could talk about money hacking at some point.
I love that.
Yeah, what do we look at? How do we money hack to get the life we want without having to spend a lot of money?
Yeah, I love that. And I think we for sure need to host a money hacking episode. So we're going to get that on the calendar. If you guys think money
Yeah.
hacking with Kedma sounds like a good episode, chime in, give us some thumbs up and tell us in the comments. But what I was driving at there is that I think that's it's an amazing narrative. It's a way that you've really empowered yourself and enabled yourself to
Yes.
live this part of your dream and your lifestyle. But also, I know it's because you also probably feel guilty paying full price anywhere. Like and it
I
might
cheat
not
through it.
be. Yeah.
Yep.
And I know you're not a guilt motivated person, as you've told me before, but it's like you can't justify it to yourself,
Can't
right?
justify it. Right. Let me tell you why, and this is how it relates to my business and business in general. So I started my cleaning company 2 years ago, really because again, so inspired around everyone else. And actually the cleaning company I started also because it was personal. Because as a young child, because I was in a pretty horrific environment, um, The only thing I could do to control the environment at the time was I could clean my room. So
Mm,
my way of controlling and disciplining myself was how clean my room was. And so that was
mm,
my respite. So the reason I bring this up is if you look at my business today, this is what I tell my team. We meet every single week. I go, look, we operate this company as if we are in a depressed economy every day, all day long.
mhm.
Do not worry about the media. Do not worry about what the news are. As far as we're concerned, even if they say we're having a great year, we're having a year of depression. And because we're always operating that way, Morgan, we think differently. We operate differently. Decisions are made like, do we spend this? How do we save this? How do we transfer this? So it does really feed into even how I run my companies.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it's tied into the feeling like that having the financial discipline is what translates into safety and
100%.
control for you. Um, I I want to make one more comment on that, and then I'd love to share a little bit about my earliest money
Please.
memory and how I think it kind of influences. But one of the things I'd love for everyone who's listening to us to take away from this is there's so much power in kind of unpacking your own narrative and understanding your own motivations. And also the people around you, right? How many of our pros are in business with their spouses or have a partner, whether it's business or just your personal and professional life? We know, what is it? What's the statistic about how financials are like the number one source of conflict for
Yes, it is.
all spousal relationships? And it's because there's a lot of emotionality here. And dare I say it, I kind of think there's a lot of trauma, right, tied up with our relationships with money. And so, what you mentioned, right, I could see scenarios where sometimes people, and I think I have this sometimes with my spouse, because who has some similarities to what you've described, which is like sometimes the tendency for someone who doesn't have that same relationship that you described might be, God, like I just want to spend the money on something nice and I don't want to feel bad about it. And I want to like, I
Yeah,
want to be able to buy an expensive jacket or a bag or a nice car and just enjoy it. And that could be a source of conflict and friction. And I think that this adds a lot of empathy if you
sure.
peel the onion back, not just of yourself, but thinking about the people around you that you're in close contact with every day. And,
I
it's
love
complex.
that. Yeah, so let me speak on that because you are 100% right. One of the top reasons for divorces is related to money friction. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I got married, the first rule I had is we were going to have separate accounts. We have separate accounts. And then we have and so every partner can do it differently, but our relationship is very simple. We have separate accounts and he gets to do all the boring bills and I get to do all the fun bills. And it really works out. So what is a boring bill? Mortgage, boring. Electricity, boring. Garbage, boring. What's fun? I just planned a whole skiing trip for our family for Christmas. Yay, what's fun? Going to France, right? I do all the fun ones. Now, there's a situation just happened because my husband him and I were just in a motorcycle accident and
Mm-hmm.
on my birthday, and he had to go in for hand surgery, and he's going to have a couple of weeks of just, therapy. And I said, no to the motorcycle. But I don't have access to his account. I don't want to. So what do you think he bought
Mm.
himself? A
Does he
motorcycle.
buy another motion? He's like, this is for me. This is for me.
He said, I'm not going to let that bring me down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because we don't have our money together, there's no friction.
Yeah, I love that. That's the way that you have organized it. And funnily enough, I don't think we had as much intentionality at it, but Justin and I, my husband and I, have very much the same arrangement.
Really?
And I think it's, yeah, and I think it's because kind of what you described, he has a more similar relationship to money as I think a little bit of what you described for yourself, but taking care of the boring bills and handling those things, that gives him a good sense of control and
Yes.
stability. And actually, in my prior marriage, I was the one who took care of everything, which is very common for most
It's
women.
right.
And I kind of like leaned the other way after that relationship wound down and we each found different paths. And so now I actually really enjoy that I have a partner that I feel like is really stable and understands those things because in my prior relationship, it didn't feel that way. It felt like all of that pressure. And to some extent, it gave me a lot of stability to have control over it. And now I find that that's probably why I'm in a happier marriage this time around, is I have that nice stability. Um, but yeah, such a good reflection. So that's a takeaway for all of you guys listening, is to think about your own money stories, but maybe do a little probing and a little digging and see what you can pick up around the people around you. Um, Early money memories. You shared a really powerful one, Kedma, and I think very similar in that whenever I think about my earliest money memory, very young. And what comes to mind for me is a conversation that I had with my mom. And I think I was very young, probably about three and a half at the time this conversation happened. And it was just hearing my mom say the phrase, kids are expensive. And at the time, I was very young and I was confused when she said it. And I had some kind of, because I was just learning at that age to think about where babies come from. I just
Right.
hadn't had a little brother. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like you just have a baby. They just pop out of your stomach.
Right.
They're not expensive. And my mom was, she made the point. She was like, no, it's not that. It's everything else that goes into having kids. That there's a lot of kids are expensive. There's a lot that goes into maintaining a family. And it kind of became a little bit of a family joke for a while, that interaction, because it was kind of a cute one where I was like, they just pop right out of you. But that memory, I think, really is really a powerful indicator of a heavy theme of my childhood and upbringing, which is that I grew up in a family of contractors and tradesmen, so very working class, very blue collar. And my parents were and still are amazing. They took excellent care of us.
Mm.
But I was always very aware of the effortfulness that went into
Mm.
taking care of us. I was always very, very aware of, I would say my parents never made me feel like a burden, but I would say looking back on it, I felt the weight of I'm not contributing right now because
Wow.
I'm a kid, right? And I think I'm the eldest child, and I think that seeing how hard both of my parents worked to make a life for us, and seeing some of the struggles elsewhere with other relatives and members of our family, and because we always had different relatives that would come on hard times and would stay with us. Like we were
Wow.
honestly, my entire childhood was probably a lot of different relatives kind of coming and going, and my parents were a nice, stable force in a lot of our family. But just that like anticipation of being old enough to be able to contribute and to be able to make my own
Mm.
way. So I was very motivated to get a job at a young age. Um, very motivated to make sure that I could find my own way to pay for college. I never had an expectation of my parents helping me with that. And they did. They leaned in to support where possible, but I was very, very driven about, getting a full ride academic scholarship and finding a pathway where I wasn't being burdensome. And I think that's been a thread that's been very consistent in who I am now as an entrepreneur and as a professional, and the types of things that I've gravitated towards. Um, just that concept of that early, kids are expensive, and like how that kind of echoes through the years.
I have a question for you. Your parents are still living.
They are.
When did you confront your mother on this?
I have not spoken to my mom on this specifically. So good
Wow.
question. Should I, Kedma?
I think absolutely.
What do you think? And I don't necessarily, I wonder when
In
you
a
say the word
loving way.
confront.
In a
Yeah,
loving way. What you could say is, you have a great relationship with her, right?
I do. Yeah.
So you could say, Mom, I really have learned so much from you, and I just admire you. You've taught me a lot, just in my own motherhood. But there was a part in my own, childhood that I do want to reflect back to you and how it impressed on me. And I think it's important because as parents, we try to do our very best. I think about even me myself as a parent, and we never know what sticks because we
Yeah.
very rarely have our child come back and say, Mom, this stuck with me, this
Hmm.
stuck with me, or this stuck with me. And it gives her a chance to really understand from your perspective. It also gives your brain a chance to have what we call a reframe
Mm.
because your mind is stuck in that moment. See, I don't get to do that reframe because of my type of situation, but you do get to do that reframe because you came from a loving home. And what can
Mm.
happen is your brain can get an alternative experience to your original experience and then reframe the experience.
I really love and appreciate that as a recommendation. And I'll definitely think about how to have the right conversation with my
Yeah,
mom, because, the point that I would really like to clarify is that I don't feel like there was anything wrong that my parents did or that my mom did. And that I think that that's just a normal part of, probably even a healthy part in some ways, of talking about, the realities of life and like what life costs.
right.
And like how we need to be thinking about, taking care of ourselves. And so I think my parents never, I think that they did a really good job of really shielding us from things that might have been challenging and hard times. Like, I don't feel like we ever really wanted for anything, but it's like looking back with the empathy and the knowledge of what things were like and how they were going through and just understanding more context as an adult too. So yeah, I think it's interesting to think about. And I love that recommendation of how can you explore a reframe to move
That's right.
even more positively into the future around those relationships.
Reframing is very important. And while it's not money related, I want to pause on what I mean by that. So, one of my earliest relationships, I was very, very young, and it was someone I was dating who moved to, actually, he went to Stanford University, but our breakup was so bad. And the reason it was so bad was I was very young, I was 16, and I had scheduled, to go and fly to meet him. Except I, of course, didn't tell my parents. So
Mm.
at the airport, and back then, we had where they call on the intercom, and they're like, Kedma Bashari, please pick up, line one. And it's actually my father on, who just found out that I'm planning to go to see this boy in Stanford. And he said, "You have to come home." I said, "I'm not coming home." He said, "Well, if you get on that plane, you're not going to have a home to come to." I said, "Okay, I'm getting on the plane because
Mm.
I'm challenged." So I get on the plane and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. All of a sudden, two police officers come on and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a runaway on this flight. Please have your driver's license and passports ready." So they came up to me and they said, they identified me and they said, "You have to get off the plane." I said, "I'm not getting off the plane." They said, "Okay, once you get to your destination, you will be arrested and you will have to fly home." I said, "Okay, I'm getting off the plane." So I get off the plane. My suitcase goes to California and my boyfriend breaks up with me. Okay? This is how memories are so important in reframing. Now, why do I tell you this? The power of reframing. So my current husband, who I've married with 22 years, because I'm also divorced, but happily married 22 years, knew this story. And before we got married, I was in Arizona and he was in Oregon. He made a pit stop as it was moving to Oregon without telling me. He made a pit stop so we're heading towards California. And as we approach, he has me with like blinds. He goes, "I'm doing a surprise." I had no idea. Where did he take me? He took me to the front steps of Stanford University. And then what he did, Morgan, is he ran up the stairs and he came down and he goes, "You made it! You made it! I've missed you!" And totally reframed the entire memory.
Ah, such a powerful moment. I can tell your husband's brilliant in the same way that you are.
So anyway, that's what I wanted to share. If we're going to talk about the power of reframing our money thoughts, the power of reframing our experience, that's an example of how reframing is done at the best of the best. Because now I'm no
Mhm.
longer sad.
About
Now I
that.
have that he showed up and reframed that memory.
Yeah, that beautiful healing conversation and interaction. I love that. Um, I'm trying to think about our time today because there's so many things that I'm very excited to dive into with. So we'll just have to keep doing this on a regular basis. I think what I'd love to do is kind of tie some of our early money memory stories, and you and I have been sharing a bit about how we identify with some of these habits, and I'd love to kind of articulate that. Quick I drafted up some quick like archetypes. So common things that some of you guys might identify with or you might have seen in other people. And so Kedma and I are going to talk through these really quickly. Well, not
Okay.
really quickly. We're going to talk through them with you guys with the time that we have today. So this is just a nice, simple little, I'm going to hit
You
present
going to
mode
share the
on.
screen? Yep.
I am. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and share this. And this is just a quick little view of let's talk about money memories and how these different relationships with money can influence our behavior, and let's tie it back to business. So these could be things
Nice.
that you guys have seen with people that you work with, or it might be something that you identify with. And
Great.
this is a very simple little slideshow that I put together. So let me see if I can click through this. Oh, it's not working for me.
It
Here
won't
we
let
go.
you go? Oh,
Oh,
bummer.
there we go.
Okay.
Okay, so the first archetype, so some of these names, forgive me, they might not be the most flattering, but let's just think of them for kind of cartoonish. The hoarder, safety and savings. So this is
Yep.
somebody who feels the most secure with money saved in the bank, high level of control over their finances. And I wanted to just talk through with some of these archetypes, like why it feels good, why this is something that continues to be a habit and is reinforced. And like we were talking about with some of your experiences, having that financial control, it
Correct.
provides control, that sense of safety. And so I wanted to talk with you a little bit about how do we see this manifest in business behaviors, maybe the good and the challenging components of it. So what do you think?
Well, let's first understand there's a statement we hear all the time. Save for a rainy day.
Mhm.
That's a hoarder. Save for a rainy day,
Yep.
right? Why don't we ever say save for a sunny day?
Well, you
Why
can go live and enjoy it. Yeah.
don't why nobody say save for a sunny day? Right?
Yeah.
Where this goes really well as a hoarder is like, yeah, they say that money is king, but credit is queen. I always say credit is queen. Money is king, credit is
Oh,
queen. Yeah.
I'm not sure I've heard you say this before. Tell me
Yeah.
more.
Oh, well, some of these things I say, I tell everybody who I coach, I will tell you everything, but there's a few things I always keep. So you're
I love that
always,
you're sharing it.
yeah. So I say money, yeah, money is king. But really, the queen is credit. And so you need to have both, right? You can have money in the bank, but if you have poor credit, you're going to have a hard time leveraging. I think it's important to have enough money, like we do the 6 month rule. Enough
Mhm.
money that, again, if you need to step into that, I am definitely a hoarder. I have multiple parts, but there is a part of me that's definitely a hoarder. And I'm so disciplined. If I look at the amount of income and sales I receive and the amount I actually spend on myself, it's
Mhm.
very, very little.
Mm.
Because I am so disciplined and I challenge myself down to the part, and then we'll talk about business. If I buy myself a dress, Morgan, and this goes for any female right now who has a huge closet, I'm not stereotyping, but usually females have bigger closets than males. If I buy a dress for myself, I must give up 2 dresses.
Mm.
So
And
I
this is a learned behavior that you've
This is a
implemented for
learned
yourself?
behavior.
Okay.
This is a
Okay.
learned behavior. So I imagine all my dresses speak to me because I'm starting to be a puppet master. But I walk in and they're like, "No, I've been your friend for so long. I'm cute. I'm purple. I look great.
Mhm.
Don't choose me." And this is what happens. I have these conversations. I'm like, "Guys, we have a new friend coming in, and they know 2 of us are leaving, right?" So that is
I want to see that Pixar movie. It's like Toy Story leveled up a little bit. So just to say it back to you. So you've recognized, and obviously you've done a lot of reflection around money and your relationship with money and
yes,
had so much growth and different
yes,
trajectories over the years. So this is how you have said, I recognize this tendency and I know that I use this as a sense of control. But
correct,
instead of accumulating, I'm going to be really intentional about when I decide to make a purchase. This is how I'm going to make sure I'm being intentional about what I keep. And that's
correct.
this is a behavior that you put into place to help curb
But
the
yes.
tendency to accumulate. Okay.
And the problem is our society in the US in particular has a problem with accumulation. You can study it by the amount of storage units that are
Yeah.
exploding. And so
Hmm.
you have to ask yourself, what percentage of your space are you using? What
Hmm.
percentage of what you buy are you using? And do you really use everything? But if you start to discipline, you'll start to realize that in simplicity, most of us are not using 100% of our clothes, right?
Hmm.
We're probably using 25%. So it becomes very fresh and very clear. Now, where does saving and hoarder go against us? Let me take an example. When I opened my cleaning company, I didn't want to be Jane in the truck. I wanted to know enough for cleaning, but I wanted to make sure that I had someone in that space that was much knowledgeable than I am. So I paid, I took out of my savings and I paid for a director of operations. So that was a very difficult thing for me because I was taking risk. Okay, I'm taking out my savings and I'm placing it into someone I know to grow the company. Best decision I ever made. But if
Hmm.
I had said no to that, I probably would not have a successful company the way it is today.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's a critical thing. So for everyone who's listening to this, if you're thinking about maybe you maybe identify a little bit with this safety and savings mentality, or you see it in somebody that you work with, some of the common areas that this can make us stumble is whenever we become so attached to saving money as a safety
Right.
mechanism that it's preventing us from investing in things that are going to make the business healthier and more stable and give you a better quality of life. And so to Kedma's point about a reframe, the most powerful mechanism that I could give you around this is you need to have behavior change. You need to align your identity with that new behavior, right? And
Mhm.
so in this case, like what Kedma just described and just demonstrated, aligning her need for that safety with the idea that having that director of operations is going to make the business more stable and it's going to generate more money and it makes everything safer was how you got over that bridge, is what it
Right.
sounded like.
And what I would say, especially for this episode and future, I think that each one that you're going to bring up, the archetype, needs its own episode. Like we could spend 30
Yeah.
minutes on this. So I would say hold back the other ones. Don't share your secret sauce because
Okay.
yeah, because there's too much for us to cover on this. The other thing I would say is it's the opposite right now. I deal with a lot of business owners who are very apprehensive around getting virtual assistants because what is their statement? Well, I can do the emails and I can make the
Hmm.
phone calls and I can do
Hmm.
the social media. And why should I spend that money? Let me keep the money for myself. What they don't understand is them as the founder, they're worth $1,000 an hour, but they're doing the work of $10 an hour. So the way I reframe that is I do a time management assessment and then almost 100% of the time, more than 50% of their time is doing things that are under 20 bucks an hour. So,
Right.
if we identified that you, Morgan, are working at $10 an hour and you've put 50 hours a month there, I usually say, listen, are you okay if I write you $500 check? You've done such a great job. I want to celebrate you've spent 50 hours. And then they're like, okay, now I get it. Now I get it.
Yeah.
So again, hoarder is there's pros and cons. And you
Hmm.
have to be very mindful. Wherever you identify, you have to look at where's the strength and where could it actually harm you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so happy you brought up that example because that's where my mind went to when you started talking about this. And, reframing this idea that it's not that you are, um, you know, throwing money away, that you're paying for something that you could do, but it's this idea that of what you're losing out on because you're spending time and effort there. So we'll have to go deep again about
We have to.
time and money.
Yep.
We use all of these same words to describe how we handle and accumulate and value time the same way as money, because time is money. But, whenever you start thinking about you're not, losing dollars, or you're not losing dollars of paying a VA, but you're losing 5, 10 times more than that with the things
Yep.
that you're not spending that. So the opportunity cost being the technical term there. Um,
And Morgan, back to you because of your technical knowledge, and I think we need to really define this either now or in the future. If we take an item like that as a clear expense, right?
mhm,
The question is it clearly an expense? And now I'm going to actually ask you to challenge. Do you consider it as an expense? Do you consider it as an investment? Do you consider it as an
mm,
asset? Or do you consider it as a liability? So if we took something like this, where you were pipelining your time and paying someone like an assistant, where would
mhm,
you place that? Because I think we have, again, problems in reframing. So many times we think it's an expense when it's actually an investment. So how
right.
do you speak to that? And where do you draw the line on the definition? Because this is part of the issue.
Yeah, I think, oh, such a good question. And the first time that it's ever been posed. So here's how I thought about it when you asked that. So I think you're right. We think about an expense and we start thinking about something that is on the P&L, it's
Correct.
detracting from our profit. So that's the part of this that's a negative framing. But whenever you pivot and you start thinking about, okay, I'm intentionally spending money as an investment. So that
Yes.
distinguishing between an expense versus an investment, I think is so critical because you're buying yourself something on the other side. And this is true of tools, right? This is what when you're
Mm,
investing in software, you're investing in an assistant, you're investing in your team, you're training your
mm,
team, you're investing in your own knowledge, right?
yeah,
This isn't something that's a loss. It's that reframe of what am I getting on the other side of this that's making me
yes.
holistically better. And so then you mentioned the words liability and asset. And so
Yes.
I think when we start penning in on these areas of the business, so if you use the example of like an assistant, or maybe we think about like a somebody who answers the phone, right? Whoever
Never
our
answer the phone.
receptionist and
Right.
so the other way that I think about it is if you're the business owner and you're like, well, I don't want the expense, and you haven't bridged that to the investment yet of being able to delegate that,
Correct.
you're a liability now, right? That's a liability form of thinking
So
because
the
you're
founder could be a liability.
very much because whenever we have this, and I love your idea, let's just stick on hoarder because there's a lot to unpack in our
There's too
remaining
much
minute.
to cover. Let's stick on
Yeah,
order.
so we'll continue the thread with the other archetypes. But in this case, right, if you are this safety and savings, you don't want to spend the dollar, you haven't yet been able to pivot to the thought about investing, you become the failure point, right? The critical risk is how
Yeah.
we like think about
The
it in
bottleneck.
larger organizations. Yes. you're the bottleneck. So now if, I had a pro that I was coaching a few years ago who his phone was the only phone that existed for anyone. So he went on vacation with his wife, and he was trying to kind of twofold. He was trying to answer the phone on vacation with his wife, but then he hit a cellular outage. And so for a week, every single call to his business was bounced back. So all of the revenue that was lost, that's a liability, right? And so
Wow.
when we cross that bridge and now we're thinking about this is an investment now, you've built an asset. So I think that's that next piece, which is any time that you're investing in something being more streamlined, more efficient, and if you can delegate it successfully, that's when your business has an asset that's sellable eventually. It's a
Right.
process, it's tools, it's a system that other people can do instead of you just, owning a
I
job
love that.
like we talk
I
about.
love that. And I think it
Yeah.
ties back to when you said business is personal, because you and I are both in the finance space. And I'm going to, again, ask you this question. How many times can you logically tell someone what logically should happen because you can see the data, you can see the metric, you can see, or based on previous work, but they still make an emotional decision. That's why I always say that logic could never supersede an emotional argument. If you've ever been married, you know that to be true. You're going to come in
Right.
with a logical statement. I'm like, you're going to lose. You're going to lose
Right.
because it's emotional. And I bring this up for an important reason. I am currently coaching someone who is a superstar business owner. She has 400 staff people. Okay, so
Mm.
massive, like for business.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a massive. And she is nationwide. And I was doing an analysis on where she's spending her time. I don't want to laugh, but her primary calls are going to her cell phone
Oh, wow. Okay. Because she's got that control. It feels safe to her to
because
be the
she
one
has the
handling it.
control. And even
Hmm.
though I am logically telling her that's not logical for someone at your stage with your income, but it was that. And so again, business, and her comment was nobody can do it better than me. Nobody, or the other comment was everybody wants to talk to me, right? Everyone wants to
Yeah.
talk to a Morgan. Everyone wants to talk to a Kedma. So anyway, I'm going to kick it back to you, but like, what do you do when the logic is clear, but the business owner is emotionally tied to an alternative decision?
Yeah.
How do
Oh gosh.
what?
Such a good discussion because and I think you're so right. So living in the financial space and you being coaching and thinking
Yeah,
about like financial advisory, it's 100% a truth that no one ever makes a rational, logic-based decision about anything, I don't think. It's
right.
all emotional. No one is ever motivated to take action or make a decision unless it hits the right emotional note. The logic is just backup. It's just how you justify
Yes,
it to yourself.
yes.
So I've always tried to be really intentional about that when it comes to like looking at and talking about financials. And so I think a way that you guys could think about this if you're looking at your financials with your bookkeeper or you're thinking about this from an operations perspective is really always try to tie it back to the reality of what's happening with your team on the ground because that starts to tap into an emotional state. And so what I mean by that is like if we know that there is some type of positive behavior change that needs to happen. So for example, you got to raise your prices, right? The math
Right.
says boom, 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 you're not hitting the market, you're losing money here, you have to raise your prices, and that feels scary and that feels like a loss of control. So some of the tactics that I've tried to lean on in the past have been translating this into the reality of if you don't do it versus if you do it, and finding those emotional notes. So if you don't do this, you're going to keep losing money, right? You're going to deplete your savings.
Bravo.
You're taking out the second mortgage on your house. You have to have that conversation with your wife about how you're taking a second mortgage out on the house because
Right.
you need to make payroll. And then you have to start laying people off because you're not profitable. And you have to have a conversation where you're telling someone that they have to go find a new job to support their family, right? Because you didn't make the decision now to be profitable and keep the ship afloat, which is the captain's job, right? You have to keep the ship
Absolutely.
afloat so everyone can stay on it. And so I think like building emotional narratives with people who you work
Yes.
with, but for yourself is how you get over these bridges and really try to translate them.
I want to
What
add,
about
I love this. I love this. And I want to add another piece in a quick story. Emotional narrative and the language by which you talk about money. So I'm going to bring it home. I just was meeting with a couple, lovely couple, and they were at full capacity. They're on the other end of it, Morgan. They have so many leads coming in, so they're looking to hire someone to take over. And they said, we can't find, this is how the conversation goes. I said, well, what's the issue? We can't find anyone. Okay. And so, you know me, I'm data driven. I said, you can't find anyone. And then one of the founders goes, yeah, we can't find anyone. I said, well, how many people live in your area? And they said, 500,000 people. I go, so you're going to tell me you can't find one person? And then one of the founders said, well, even a monkey can do it. And I had to say, with all disrespect and with all love, if your response is, well, even a monkey can do it, that's probably why you can't find someone.
Yeah.
That's probably why you can't find someone, because that statement alone tells me everything I need to know about how you feel about even hiring someone. So then that goes back to personal. You know, do people want to make money in your company? Because in our line of work, and you know this as well as me, the employees get to choose now where they want to spend their time. They get to choose who they want to work with. And so even down to that, I would just say your narrative and your language by which you talk about money.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought that home too with culture building with your team, like how you motivate the team to do these things to, all work together is a
100%.
huge part. Quick question for you. Do you
Yep.
have a hard stop here, or do you have at least
I
another
do
10 or
not have a
15?
hard stop, but what I'm hoping from these meetings, and I don't know because I'm just loving it, I hope that the audience gets an action item every time.
Agreed. Yes,
Okay.
agreed. So
Okay.
we'll have to riff for a second on exactly what that action. I have a couple of ideas, but one more meaty bit around the hoarder archetype, the
Yes.
safety and savings. I want to go back to your thought about how cash is king, but credit is
But it is
queen.
queen.
So one of the most common items that I see with financial management, especially with pros, is, we've grown up with some amount of scarcity. And oftentimes people have had a negative money interaction, or they've seen debt be a really negative thing, right? So makes sense. We have this fear around overwhelming debt, getting stuck in debt, not being able to dig our way out of it. And it makes sense. All of it, it's kind of like the monster under the bed. And I think this is a big part of why some of you might resonate with this. You think about, like, this is why people like David Ramsey are so popular for financial advice, because it's a very simple, straightforward, no debt, wipe it out, don't ever have credit, don't use credit cards.
Right.
And so I see this reluctance in a lot of teams to ever make an investment, or to ever leverage anything to invest to make things better, because of the fear around credit and about how credit, just like the negative associations attached to it. So Kedma, how did you bridge this, and how do you coach others into what a healthy, because I don't think 100% avoidance isn't healthy, because it reduces our options and our opportunities. And
100%.
obviously the other side's not healthy either. How do you coach people into finding that healthy middle?
Yeah. So I think in future episodes, we can talk about how I really got there, because, the average millionaire has to go, technically, the average millionaire goes bankrupt 3 times before they made it. I went bankrupt, and it was the best decision I ever made. And we'll talk about that in the future conversation. But I had a credit score at my lowest around 450. But if we pull it now, it's about 810. And that's what I love, is when I work with banks and lenders and institutions and investors, a lot of times with business owners, first thing I do is I show them my credit score. Because I want them to know I'm in the game. I'm like, you want to play with me? This is why I challenge people who are bragging. I call them my bragameters. They brag online of all this money. And half the time I'm like, show me your bank account. Stop talking. Okay, stop.
Yes.
I don't care about what you're going to do. Show me your bank account. So I'm that kind of person. I'm like, you know what?
Yep.
Here's my credit. So the first thing I want to tell you is I 100% believe in Dave Ramsey when it comes to personal finance. I 100% disagree with Dave Ramsey when it comes to business finance. Because I am an accredited investor, spent 15 years with SBA, and I did underwriting. And what I will tell you is, from a credit score perspective, if you are poor with credit or you do no credit, it's equal. I want to remind yourself, if you're poor with credit or you do no credit, so if you come to me and you say, hey, coach, I am debt free, but I don't want to use my credit cards, you're equal. Because when you have to go to, hey, I want to get an SBA loan to buy a commercial office, they're going to look at your credit score. And if you're not using credit, you're almost in the same category, because there's no pattern that has been established. So what I would tell you, and this will be a longer conversation, and you and I both know this, we want to understand good debt and bad debt,
Yeah.
right? And so just very, very, just the tip of the iceberg. Good debt is I own a commercial office. I bought the office for 600,000 back in 2008. It's probably valued right now at about 1.1. And my interest started at 0.04%,
Mm,
less than 0.5% interest.
wow.
That's why.
I'm like, it took me a
Okay.
minute to process that
Okay,
actually. I was like,
so
what?
0.04% was for 10 years, and it never can exceed 3% for the duration of
Wow.
the mortgage. Okay.
This is Kedma's negotiation skills at
Yeah,
work,
I do.
everybody.
There's a lot
She
of,
teaches she
I teach
teaches
this.
workshops on negotiation.
I teach workshops on negotiation. So that's good debt. And then I'm not in the office. So the whole office is leased to a nonprofit. And then I give them a little bit of discount. So what do I get? I get the write-off for the nonprofit. This is all good debt. Bad debt is if I have a credit card and I'm paying 22% and I'm not
Right.
able to pay it off every month. So that's the easiest way to do it. And I know we're going to dive in deeper, but if you are a pro and you want to grow and you want to get to a place where you're going to use other people's money or investors, you have to be okay with working with credit.
Right. Yeah, it's something we've got to build some comfort and some healthy
Have to.
habits around to be successful. This was so powerful. And so I think, like you mentioned, let's bring it home to the takeaway point, and we'll continue to talk more in more detail about different archetypes in the future. So we got to dive deeper on like the hoarder and safety and savings. But what I'd love to ask for you that are listening would be think about your first money memory. So think about and try to find and identify what that an original association is, kind of sit with it and try to think about how it might be impacting your behaviors today. And I think if you do that, the tactical ask, the one takeaway that I would ask of you is try to think of one little micro shift. This is a 1% improvement on the habits that you have around that relationship with money that you're going to do in the next month before we see you again. So a couple of examples of this would be like one small change that's going to help you rewire if you have any maybe not the best habits around your relationship with money. So like if you're a hoarder, the safety and savings, set aside a small amount of money that you're going to invest in something that you have been pushing back on yourself for, whether it's personal or business. Some of the other, archetypes that we're going to get into later, so I'll just tease them for you guys really quick.
Don't share it.
No, don't tease them. Okay, I'll hold on to it. You're right. You're right,
Because we
Kedma.
don't
We'll
know.
hold on to it.
I'm hoping that people identify if they're a hoarder. I want them to own it and maybe let us know if they are a hoarder. Because I don't have a problem saying it. That would be fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would love for you guys that are listening, or if you find this on Facebook or YouTube, drop in the comments a little bit of details around what your money memory is and how you see it influence you. And we'll continue to unpack and talk about these different archetypes in the future. So one small behavior pattern and a couple of other ideas might
Yeah,
be,
please.
like maybe if you have a tendency to chase down ideas and chase down projects and you have shiny object syndrome, table an idea, table a purchase that you're going to make, table an investment, table that new rebrand or the additional revenue stream that you want to add because you think it's going to solve your problems. Give it a 30-day pause before you hit the trigger on that, right? Or some of you have a hard time delegating your decisions to your team. You have a hard time empowering your team. So pick a budget, like a $300 or $500 budget, something that you can live with if something goes terribly wrong, and delegate that one financial decision to somebody in the next 30 days.
That's good. That's
Um,
good.
can you think of any other examples of like little
Yeah,
micro behavior
I'm
changes?
going to make it really simple.
Do it.
Go to your closet. We don't
I
have to
love that.
complicate it. The first reframing has to happen in your life. You can go tonight, you can look at your closet and say, did I wear this in the last year? If you didn't, give it to someone else who's going to love it. You don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to first learn to purge so we can appreciate what we have. And that's what we're talking about when we discipline, when we cut the fat, right? We cut the
Right.
fat. We see it more in health. We see it more when we're doing a cost, zero cost accounting. But you can just cut the fat at home first. And just
Right.
be simply like, do you need these clothes? And it's so refreshing to get a bag of clothes and give it to Goodwill or the Salvation Army. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, I did that. So it could be that simple.
I love that. That's a great practice. It's something that our family does routinely because, like we just said, like my husband grew up in a hoarder house. So that's how he has pivoted. I love that. So the ask for you guys, go with something simple. Um, Figure out like what early money memory do you have and what is one little micro behavior shift that you can commit to this month and report back and tell us about it. Quick notes about a couple things coming up, and then we're going to sign off to see you guys next time. For anyone who's listening, I'm going to drop the link in the chat, or my friend Lynette's going to drop the link in the chat. Next month, I'm going to do it separate from Money Mastery, but I'm going to do a kind of like end of year tax countdown. So we're going to do a webinar, 30 minutes, quick hits, 90 days to slash your 2025 tax bill. So if you guys want to hop in on that and go deep and tactical really quick, then click the link whenever we drop it in and hop in for that. And a quick teaser. So the topic that I want to do next month, because it's October, I want to talk about financial horror stories with you guys. This is where the intrigue gets really thick. This is the area where Kedma, as a coach and as a financial consultant, me as a financial consultant and accountant, we see the skeletons in the closet. So what we're going to do is not just a freak show of sad stories though, but what we're going to do is we're going to unwrap some real world money mistakes that businesses have made and endured that haunted good companies for the month of October. But we're also going to take you through exactly what happened, why, and how, and what
Love it.
kind of things you can put in place in your business to prevent that. So, quick teaser. We're going to talk at least about ghosts in the machine that steal money, like steal vendor payments. We're going to unpack that. Vampires on your team that drain cash flow. And we're going to have at least one story about social engineering sirens that can lure you and members of
Ooh,
your business into costly
love
scams.
that.
So it just fits so easy. They're going to
It
all
fits so
be
easily. Yeah.
it's so easy. And it's all real world stories that we have seen and played out. We'll have them written out and shared with you guys. Maybe we'll even dress up. So we'll see you guys in
Oh, I
October
love that.
for our financial horror stories. All right, guys. First episode of the new Money Mastery Down. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you on
Thank
the next
you.
one. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Hi, everyone.